Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today, it's time to have a look at another devblog for the next major update, and this is the Pvkv4. It's another Swedish tank destroyer that they're bringing in, very similar to the Pvkv2 and also 3, since they're all pretty much developed at the same time after World War II. It's going to be rank 3, and the vehicle itself looks pretty nice. The surprising thing is that we've had 3 ground devblogs in a row. Usually, there is a naval one or an air one which has already come in, so maybe they're saving some interesting stuff for later on. We'll have to speculate, and then see next week or this week what happens, but right now, let's get into the history of the Pvkv4. The Pvkv4 was part of the same development program which resulted in the development of the Pvkv2 and 3 tank destroyers. The aim of the project was to hastily design capable new tank destroyers that could effectively match the late war and early post-war tank designs of other nations, while utilizing available platforms and avoiding costly clean sheet developments. The result of this undertaking was the development of 2 tank destroyers based on the SDRV M41, the Pvkv2 and also 3, as well as one design based off the SDRV M40L, which was the Pvkv4. The Pvkv4 featured a redesigned turret in order to house a modified 57mm Pvcan M43 cannon, with special attention being paid to the modification to reduce the cannon's recoil. In the early 1950s, the vehicle underwent comparative trials against the French AMX-13 light tank. Ultimately, the Pvkv4 wasn't ordered into production as the SDRV-74 was adopted into service. Furthermore, with the decision of the military to also adopt foreign vehicles into their fleets instead of pursuing their own developments, the need for further work on the project became redundant, resulting in the cancellation of the project. So with the Pvkv4 coming into the game, this completes the Swedish post-war experimental tank destroyers. The Pvkv2 as a vehicle was added earlier, same with the Pvkv3. And to be honest, I actually really do enjoy the Pvkv2 with its large gun. I think it works really well, whereas the Pvkv3 is a little bit over BR'd right now. It came in at a pretty decent BR since it has pretty nice optics, but then they upped it by 2 BR brackets, and now it faces KVs and just can't do any damage to them, so it can't really fill that tank destroyer role. The Pvkv4 is going to be interesting though, as another vehicle to kind of defy the ideas of historical matchmaking, but also at the same time, the simple fact that this 57 will have to see its capabilities and what it's actually able to do. Everything that I've read about this 57 was basically that it just wasn't strong enough, and if you have a think about it, the Pvkv2 out of all 3 of them is only really the vehicle that could have stood up against some of the, World War II / post-war armor. The IS-3s rolling off the tracks is definitely something to kind of think about when looking at those ideas. Even the good old British rushed out a bunch of vehicles to try and deal with stuff like the IS-3, like the Charioteer, which definitely isn't exactly a great one, but the idea of it was just to mount the gun and then kind of go from there. So this 57mm, we'll have to see how good it is. The turret itself is quite chunky, and it is going to not really move very well. And also, at the same time, it's only protected with 13mm of armor plating. So even 20mm are going to go through this thing. It does seem to have some kind of coaxial gun, so at least there's that, so you can deal with decent stuff. And the vehicle, since it's on the SDR V40L chassis, has a 142 horsepower gasoline engine, which can get up to 45 kilometers an hour. So out of the 3 of them, this one to me seems what I would class as the most jankiest, because, the Pvkv2, it has the really good gun. Overall, it can do quite well. The other vehicle, even though slightly over BR'd, has good optics and decent fire rate. This one, with its 57mm, with pretty low targeting speed, and also with the gun probably not having the best shells or best velocity, I feel like it's probably going to struggle the most out of the 3. When I think about Sweden, just as kind of a nation, They do have issues in their mid-tiers, but luckily they added Finland, and Finland kind of fixed a bunch of those problems. And that's kind of the power of subtrees right there. And I feel like this vehicle here isn't really going to blow, you know, the world by storm. It's not going to like fix any of like the Swedish issues at rank 2 or rank 3, where, you know, they have to actually run them with kind of odd vehicles to make them usable. But I still think it'll be fine. You know, you'll be able to do dailies with it. You'll be able to do specials with it. And also, I suppose technically, since it's a rank 3, you could do the SPG talent challenges with it, and the Pvkv2, and also that other machine, which I can't remember the name, but the one from the 60s, basically, that you can run with it. So for me, all these vehicles are, at least have a use in the game, doing dailies and specials and maybe some challenges, but also at the same time, it's not crazy good that that's kind of the way that you're looking at them. You want these vehicles to be more useful, so when people get to them and they're grinding through the trees, they don't get hit with what is a suboptimal vehicle. At rank 1 and 2 Sweden, you have so many vehicles that rely on a APDS shell, and once they get that APDS shell, they're kind of useful. And then you get into the era of later tier rank 2 and even rank 3, where there's just vehicles there which just don't match up with the firepower that they need to be able to deal with the tanks that they go against. And vehicles like this kind of remind me of that, and it's very similar to what happened with Italy very early on with the Leoncello. The Leoncello came out, they gave it a heat shell, that was like its big thing, and what ended up happening is it faced KVs, and it just couldn't bend them, and it faced all of these heavy tanks, and it just couldn't bend them. And the idea was, with the shell, it should be, you know, more penetration, should be able to do more damage, but because of the angles, it just couldn't do anything. And I'm really worried that this 57mm will have a similar issue. Like, it basically talks about the fact that it features overall good ballistic properties. The M43 cannon is capable of punching through the armor of hostile vehicles at most common engagement distances at this rank. And, I mean, okay, but also at the same time, I'm gonna have to see the stats, right? Like, this is one of those where it's like, okay, let's have a look at it on the dev server. So the shells aren't exactly the best. Oh well. It also has a longer reload than most other vehicles, which is kind of crippling as well. So let's go through the statistics. It has okay mobility, but its mobility equal to a very early war / pre-World War II vehicle. It has no armor at all for its BR. It has a donkey gun, which may be poor when it comes to its penetration. And then on top of it, it also has long reload and poor turret traverse. So there's not really a lot going on for this one. It's definitely the weakest out of the 3 Pvkvs in that area. And hopefully it's useful, and hopefully, you know, it gets a proper BR. So it can be good. But at the same time, like, it's just not looking at it, right? It's just looking like a pretty mediocre vehicle, and probably better just to play the Finnish vehicles around this rank so you can kind of research through it. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Brendan Quinn, Vilneus, Character Fuel, Juan the Panda, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Merciless Reaper, Orange Tail, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Moxie, B. Young, Bareen, Peter Grayling, Alan Hacker, Sem Alslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R., and also Lafouche for supporting the channel.